So maybe good afternoon. So what I'll do is I'll just give a broad overview. So this comes, it kind of covers some of the points that have already been spoken about by some of the experts, and I'll add some of my own experiences into this. So this, I've been in the EV sector. I mean, the first time I was in EV was probably in 2015 or so. So at that time it was more of a very early stage, and the focus was predominantly on the downstream, on the charging. There were a lot of talks about charging infrastructure and all those stuff. But if I look at it, if I conceptually, my interaction, or not the interaction, I've been involved in the sector in a different way 20 years back when I started my career. So I started my career in a fossil fuel industry, it's Indian Oil Corporation. I was working with a downstream oil company, and then of course later on moved to the renewable energy space. So at that time, one of the responsibilities that I was handling was expansion of fuel stations. So I used to do travel across. I was in Rajasthan at the time. So I used to do this feasibility studies for setting up gas stations on highways and cities. So that's basically what is happening on the EV right now. So in a way, from an infrastructure perspective or from a conceptual perspective, I did this for the first time like 20 years back, almost 20 years back. So I will start with that. I moved from fossil fuel industry to non-fossil fuel industry. So I will start with that kind of a story. And since I did my MBA, I have to start with a paradigm shift. So I'm starting with a paradigm shift. So actually it's happening. There's a paradigm shift from fossil fuel driven transportation to electrification of the transportation. So that's what is happening. So if you look at it, so if you look at the conventional, the 100-year-old transportation industry, or 100 or more than that, probably 120, 130 years. I will start with upstream, there's a midstream, and there's the downstream. You extract oil, you send it to refineries, you refine them, and then you send it to the final point, which is the distribution, which is the gas stations. So it's something similar. So if you look at electricity powered transportation, it's pretty similar if you look at it. One, you mine all the metals, different metals, lithium, cobalt, all of them from countries like Chile or Africa. What is the place? Australia and Bolivia, all those places, and you then send it to. You process it, and then you convert it into batteries, different chemistries, you process it in the midstream. I mean, it can be midstream or downstream. Then you finally, manufacture a car or a four-wheeler, two-wheeler, whatever it is, and then you get it charged, and that's the same process. So now I'll start with the downstream and go upstream, because I think we had speakers representing all the parts of the value chain. So just to remember, this is only a wrap-up. I'm not going to say anything new, but this is more of a recap. So the first question at downstream sector is charging or swapping. So this was a big question 5 years back, but now it is, I think, at least from my perspective, it seems that the swapping is kind of getting limited. It is probably going to be only for two-wheelers, if at all it's going to happen. And especially, I mean, there is a lot of interest, mainly to follow a Gogoro model. For people who are familiar, Gogoro is a company in Indonesia, I think. They're operating in Indonesia. So, but the question now is about charging. But now, one of the biggest impediments for someone to buy an electric vehicle from a downstream perspective is range anxiety. So what will happen? I mean, I'm okay using it for city transport, but what will happen if I have to go on a highway? So where can I find it? What will happen if I'm getting stuck somewhere? So that is one problem, but that is where the government is coming in, and of course private players are also coming in. I don't know if it is very clear. Probably it's not very clear. What happened? Yeah, so if you look at it, every state is coming up with, if they have to promote EV ecosystem, the entire manufacturing or R&D, all the ecosystem, the key is obviously to have the network. And I think Karnataka has been a leader in that area because they've been going forward and setting up instead of petrol stations, the EV stations across the highways, and coming up with enabling policies for that. And of course, the private players like Tata's, they're also setting up their own stations to enable the proliferation of the industry. So now coming to the midstream, again, I think the IIT folks are here, Arvind's team is here, and I think many of them are there. So a lot of activities, again, a question of who is going to win the technology war, or whatever you can call it. Which technology is going to dominate in the next 10 years, 10, 15 years, or 30 years? Eventually, who is going to dominate? So now, of course, all the focus is right now on lithium ion. So I'm just putting it here. So within lithium, you have so many different variants. So NMC has been the most dominant so far, but of course, people are more gradually shifting to LFP. Then, of course, there is a LTO, LCO, and all this different stuff. But eventually, again, me and Nursi and I, we are just about finishing our work for an Indian corporate. And finally, for our assessment is that obviously LFP is going to be the most dominant technology as far as electric vehicles are concerned. Then, of course, in the longer term, I mean, at least the medium term, it's going to be LFP, and with the LFP plus NMC. Then, of course, there is in the longer term, there will be sodium ion, there will be calcium ion, then there will be flow batteries, which are probably a longer term. And then of course, Arvind's team is doing a lot of work in zinc-based batteries. Sorry? Solid state. Yeah, solid state. So many things are happening. But again, the question is, again, I put a question mark. So is there going to be one technology winner, or there's a space for many of them? So this question is kind of unresolved right now, but there's a lot of exciting activity happening here. Next one. So now coming to the other part of the midstream, which is manufacturing, right? So this is a story, I think, which is repeating. Like we started, when our journey in renewable energy started with solar in 2010. So it's kind of a deja vu for us in one way, because we, even if today, despite all the incentives or the promotions that government is planning to give, probably 70-80% of all the solar panels are coming from China, and that's kind of repeating in batteries. And it is not just India; it is a global phenomenon. So this graph, if you look, it's nicely done by the Visual Capitalist. They say that like almost 50% among the top 10, like the 50% of the battery manufacturing is from China. Then of course there are some Korean and Japanese players, and of course in India we are just starting off. So even if we do, of course, we do a lot of battery assembly, battery packs, but the cells still come from China. So that's a very important question for India. Like this industry is kind of evolving in a similar way. I mean, we are good in adapting technology, using technology, and especially on the downstream, of course, we may shift. The penetrations of EV will be very high. But again, the underlying technology, where is it going to come from? Are we going to make it ourselves, or do we still rely on someone else? So, of course, the people who are following the space know that there is a government production-linked incentive, and the government is trying to push a lot of investments and making it more and more, or encouraging more Indian players to come and set up manufacturing. And there are some scenarios, of course, many scenarios, but a very optimistic scenario says that by 2030, we'll have about 150 gigawatt hour of battery cell manufacturing in India, capacity in India, so that we reduce our reliance on imports. So it gets even worse when we go further upstream, because like we have OPEC, so they decide what prices. There's a cartel, and they decide. I mean, they don't decide as such, but they create a situation where they target an ideal price point for the crude of the barrels, crude oil. So we are kind of getting a similar situation. I mean, this is a term that I coined. I don't know if someone else coined. OMEC. Instead of OPEC, we have OMEC, where you have Organization of Mineral Exporting Countries. So again, the minerals are dominated by a few countries. Just like in case of oil, where you have Saudi Arabia, Russia, and 4 or 5 or 10 countries maybe who dominate the oil markets. Now the minerals are being dominated by a few countries. Like for example, lithium mainly comes from Australia and Chile. Copper mainly comes from Chile, and cobalt is almost exclusively from Congo. And for nickel, you have Indonesia and Russia. And finally, for graphite, natural graphite. Graphite is less of a problem because you can make it from petroleum products. So now the reliance is shifting. I mean, we can do everything at the downstream, but the upstream is not looking very good. So that is why one of the reasons why we feel that LFP will eventually win is because that will reduce the reliance on cobalt, nickel, and aluminium. Sorry, not aluminium. Cobalt, nickel, and copper. Next one. So what I showed in the previous slide is from the source of material, but when it comes to processing, it's even worse. So the question is, okay, I put here, I mean, you can go through this in detail, but the key takeaway is that you can produce mines or the minerals can come from anywhere, but finally it has to be processed in China. Everything finally goes to the global factory, and from there it goes to the different parts of the world. So that is where it is. I think Hiran also mentioned about the minerals part of it. I recently read a book, I forgot the name of that, but that was kind of an eye-opener because I was also thinking that, okay, driving an EV is very green, but that's not the real story. Just to give a pragmatic perspective, not to dampen the spirits. Next. So the key issues to wrap up for the industry as a whole is, are we shifting our dependence from OPEC to OMEC? How do we compete with China in terms of the major value creation? Are we just going to be an assemble the products we buy from them and just do some assembly and just be a technology taker, not a provider? So how do we compete with the protectionism? Like countries like US and everyone is like putting in massive amounts of subsidy, giving massive for setting up manufacturing units in their own respective jurisdictions. So can India play that game? The other is the shift from IC engine to electric vehicles. So what will happen? Because the studies say that, of course, the auto manufacturing is one of the major contributors to GDP, of a country's GDP. Right now, Germany, which has some of the biggest manufacturing companies, car manufacturing companies, they are struggling with this question because it's going to hit them, the shift to EV is going to hit them very hard, their economy really hard. How do they do that? And India is also a major player when it comes to automotive industry. India has a very big automotive industry. So what will happen with this happens because it's not only a question of greening. Again, the question of just transition comes here. These are not very difficult to answer questions. So how do we tackle that? And then finally, again, this is again something I keep asking myself, are EVs really green? When does an EV become really green? So EVs really become green only when the entire grid is green, because the electricity, if it is being powered from coal, is it still really green? So that's the next question. But having said that, I want to close with a positive note, which is that innovation is really booming. I mean, of course, IITs and all of them are doing such a lot of work in terms of innovation, and many of them have. It's not just for the innovation, just for the sake of innovation, but really for the sake of deploying. And the second is, at least on the downstream, the demand side of it, the demand side of vehicles. So we anticipate a big offtake. I mean, once we have the enabling infrastructure in place, the electric vehicle is definitely going to boom, and it's not going to be a narrow end of opportunity. It is going to be there for probably next 3-4 decades. So the opportunity is pretty massive from a market perspective. And third, capital is plenty. I think people like the VCs are there. I think they are struggling to deploy, and they are able to raise money very quickly. But I think the challenge is more in deployment, right? To get the right companies to deploy the right business model and the right scaling opportunity. So you have the right idea, right execution, and right scalability, scalable business model, and the money shouldn't be a problem. And finally, the policy support is strong. The government, not only the state government, not only the central government, but also the state governments, each of them. Most of them are competing with to outdo each other in terms of policy support. Of course, announcements perspective, the reality might be, that's something I can't comment on, but at least from, it's nice PR. It's nice PR to be seen as supporting policy, but not only that, but even genuinely it could be a case. So finally, having said that, I will finish with my paradigm, the MBA stuff, the wrong things that I learned from MBA. Paradigm shift is underway, and this is, we are here looking at the EV industry. It is not a very short-term opportunity. So if you take a very long-term horizon, long-term perspective, I think this is an industry where we can create personal wealth and also make a big impact.